Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. This story begins as Haruka hides near some goblins. The idiot blows his cover by stepping on the smallest twig ever, so the goblins chase after him. Haruka smiles with utter confidence as he jumps into the air, and all the goblins fall into his trap. Haruka is very pleased with himself, as he's doing a great job surviving alone in another world. A look back shows how Haruka got himself in this situation. Haruka has always been a loner, and he explains to us that it's because he just never wanted anything to do with his classmates. He didn't like any of them, and they would just get in the way of what he finds most important, and that's reading. As Haruka looked around his classroom, the divide among the students was very clear. There were the popular girls, the delinquents, the jocks, the class rep, the nerds, and the others category. Haruka didn't belong to any of these groups, but he wouldn't have it any other way. This was when a magic circle appeared out of nowhere. Haruka was excited because it was just like the ones he had read in manga, but he remembered that going to another world is a pain in the ass. The heroes in the manga always ended up having to be around a bunch of people, but that sounded like torture to Haruka. He tried his best to get out of the classroom, but it didn't go so well. All the other students panicked as the magic circle expanded, but Haruka cleverly escaped through an air vent. Unfortunately for him, the magic circle chased him up there, and he found himself in the generic white void place. Haruka knew exactly what to expect from reading so much manga. He wondered where the typical king was, and when his daughter, who was beyond the reach of any nerd, would show up. Some old guy frantically signaled to him, so Haruka realized that this guy was some sort of god. It turns out that the teleporting was first come first serve, so Haruka's classmates were teleported already, and Haruka was left behind. Haruka was allowed to pick his status and skills just before being sent to his new world. A giant board appeared with all the options, but Haruka was disappointed about something. This was the first time the old god summoned so many people, so all of the cheat skills were already taken, and only the worthless ones were left. Haruka took a look at his options, but they were all terrible. One skill was just being able to hold a stick. Some other ones were just good overall general health and walking. Haruka made himself feel even worse by seeing some of the overpowered skills that he missed out on, like 4-element magic. Back to the bad stuff, Haruka found titles like Shut In and Neat. Haruka demanded for the old god to give him more options because he wouldn't even be able to pass the first village with the ones he had to choose from. The old god became fed up, so he decided to just give Haruka all the remaining skills at once. Haruka gained all the leftover worthless skills and he was teleported. In the new world, Haruka is supplied with a bag that can hold unlimited items. Haruka gears up and checks his stats. His stats screen tells him to roll some dice, and he remembers reading about this skill. It allows him to allocate points by rolling dice. Haruka curses the old guy for giving him such a useless skill, and he rolls the dice. He rolls a double M, but Haruka has no clue what that means. He assumes the worst, as he thinks that M stands for masochist. However, his stat screen just tells him to choose which stat he wants to add to. Haruka doesn't think that raw stats will help him survive with his terrible abilities, so he chooses to put the points into luck. His strategy is to completely ignore a balanced build, and instead he will just max out luck. Just then, Haruka realizes that the M stood for max because his luck stat is now maxed out. Haruka is surprised when he notices that he has 2 extra skills in the sea of useless abilities. He assumes that it's because he was summoned alone. Haruka's loner title means that he's a loner with no friends, and he cannot form a party. His servitude skill allows him to command others, and it was given to him because of his loner status. That's pretty cool, but it also means that Haruka has to say goodbye to his dreams of having a harem. Haruka wonders where all his classmates are, but it doesn't matter because he can't party with them anyway. Haruka decides to just begin his journey, and he wants to start by securing a base of operation. It's pretty hard to see through the forest, so Haruka is worried about a monster showing up. He wonders if he has a skill that could be useful, but the only one that comes to mind is the skill that allows him to doze off. Haruka tries on the contact lenses he has in his bag and finds that it's actually super useful. It allows him to see a bunch of extra stuff, and he finds that it grants him the appraisal skill. This leads to Haruka finding an edible mushroom that draws out latent abilities. His bottomless bag lets him take as many as he wants, so he apologizes to it for thinking it was useless earlier. Haruka chugs down some water, but he hears something in the distance. This sound leads him to a cave, and he prays that he doesn't find a monster. Haruka's bag came with a bunch of camping stuff, so he decides to make this cave his base. He uses temperature magic to light some twigs on fire, and determines that the leftover skills are actually pretty useful. Haruka checks his stats again, and finds that his temperature magic leveled up, which unlocks fire magic. Haruka worries about what he will do if a monster appears because he can only smack it with a stick right now, but he just ends up falling asleep. The next day, Haruka wakes to find that everything is okay. He has items that repel monsters, and his shut-in title protects his living space. Haruka can now use fire magic to start fires, so he cooks himself some breakfast. He had some beef jerky in his bag, and he had some of the mushrooms he found the day before. The food is delicious, so Haruka's very grateful for his villager starter bag. It's more than just a villager bag though, so Haruka thinks it's more like a bag for a survivalist. Haruka heads out to find more food for later, but he knows that the main concern right now is how to protect himself from monsters. Just then, Haruka finds the last thing he wanted to see, 2 goblins. They are small fry monsters, but their stats are higher than expected. Haruka wonders if he can even win, but he realizes that it doesn't matter because he will have to learn to deal with monsters one way or another. Unfortunately, Haruka doesn't think that his stick will do much. Haruka does have a skill called wrapping, which allows him to wrap all sorts of things with magic and grants various effects. This seems to make his stick stronger, so Haruka is determined to surpass everyone, even without any cheat skills. Haruka begins his first attack ever, and he brutally beats down on the first unsuspecting goblin. The second one tries to attack him, but its moves are pretty lame, and Haruka easily dodges them. Haruka somehow knows how to use a new power, and he eliminates the second goblin. Afterwards, Haruka is pleased after winning his first battle, and he heads back to base. He brought back one of the clubs that the goblin used, but he determines that his stick is still better. Haruka is excited to find that he leveled up, and all his stats more than doubled. His cane mastery leveled up as well, which is strange because he just swung his stick around a few times. Haruka got magic infusion as well, which probably came from him enchanting his stick with magic. His calisthenics went up as well because Haruka has never missed a morning exercise. Haruka is exaggerating quite a bit though, as he has only been in this new world for 2 days. Later, Haruka is tired of eating mushrooms already. He would rather eat meat, but he knows that he would be scolded by the class rep for being ungrateful. With his meal done, Haruka decides to try out enhancing himself. This magic infusion enhances his physical and magical defenses. Haruka's appraisal skill has also reached level 2, but he wonders why it's showing a bunch of question marks on all his stuff. Haruka decides not to overthink things, and he leaves. He celebrates as the forest blesses him with something already, but he realizes that it's just another mushroom. Haruka searches for meat that might grow out of trees, but he remembers that he's supposed to be practicing his magic. Haruka finds that his enhanced body is much lighter, so much so that it feels like he is teleporting. That isn't all, as his dexterity is insane now too. Haruka finds a more powerful goblin, but he easily defeats it. He takes out another, so he is confident that he could defeat even a group of 3 of them now. Haruka actually runs into a group of 3 goblins, but he's a coward, and he decides that he has had enough fighting for the day. Haruka recaps his day, which consisted of his goblin battle and magic studying at night. On day 5, Haruka succeeded in defeating a goblin with a single strike, and he decorated his base with some fancy stuff he made with magic. Haruka is once again pretty pleased, as his life in this new world is starting to come together. That night, Haruka chases a meaty rabbit as he's desperate to eat some meat. Just then, Haruka detects a presence, and he instantly determines that it's not a goblin. It turns out to be his classmates, but Haruka is disappointed to see that it's the delinquents. Haruka would rather not get involved with them, but he senses that another group is in the other direction. His clairvoyance skill allows him to see who it is, but he's horrified to see that it's the popular girls. The jocks are also rapidly approaching. The nerds are nearby too, but after talking to them from time to time in his old world, Haruka would rather take a pass on seeing them. That just leaves the class rep and her friends. Haruka knows that it would be best if he had some friends in this harsh world, and he has known the class rep since grade school. Haruka decides to at least say hello, but he stops himself. He realizes that he feels really free and isolated right now. He can live the way he wants without anyone butting in, and he wouldn't exchange that for anything. Haruka makes his final decision, which is to conquer this new world all alone. Haruka hides from the other students, but one of the delinquents heard something from his direction. He is about to be discovered, but the guys end up assuming that the noise came from the bunny that was supposed to be Haruka's dinner. Haruka spies on the delinquents to hear what they are discussing, but the perverts are just talking about girls. They are some real degenerates, but Haruka knows that the class rep will stop them from doing anything to the girls. However, the delinquents have a guy named Tanaka on their side whose skill will allow them to do whatever they want. The delinquents go back to the other students, but Haruka's a serious loner and he doesn't want anything to do with them. Haruka heads home to enjoy more of his delicious mushrooms, and he finds that his loner level has gone up. It's kind of a depressing title because it's starting to wreck Haruka's self-confidence. Haruka is still only level 3, and he blames his Master of None and Dummy skills. He isn't sure what they do, but he assumes that the Master of None means that he can't stay focused on any one thing long enough to make it really strong. However, it does allow him to accomplish a lot of different things. As for the Dummy skill, Haruka assumes that it just makes him a puppet, which would make it the worst skill to ever exist. Haruka decides to eat his troubles away, but this just reminds him that he doesn't have any meat to eat. On day 7, Haruka wakes up to the sounds of fighting. Haruka finds the nerds in battle, and he wonders if he should help them. He uses his appraisal skill on them, and is shocked to find that they won't need his help at all. They have way better classes than him, and Haruka is the only NEET even among the nerds. This reminds him that unlike him, they actually have overpowered skills. Unfortunately, this is a lot like how things were in his old world. His class was full of top athletes and ace students. They even had kids of celebrities, and Haruka often wondered how he ended up there. Haruka determines that the dweebs can handle themselves, but he notices that some sneaky little monsters are sneaking up from behind them. Haruka remembers being friendly with the nerds in class, so he decides to help them out. The nerds thank him, so Haruka shows them his sweet looking cave, and they marvel at how fancy it is. Haruka explains that he just learned how to use earth magic, and he used it to make his cave really secure. They wonder if Haruka did all this alone, so Haruka points out that he's always alone. Haruka wonders why the nerds aren't with the other students, and he is shocked when they reveal that they are on the run. It all started when everyone was transported before Haruka. Everyone was in shambles because they didn't know anything about being isekai'd, but the nerds were well versed on this subject. They were already assigning points into their skills, so the jocks demanded information from them. Everyone else was falling apart, but the class rep knew that they needed to keep quiet in the woods. It was too late, however, as they were already found by a group of goblins. Haruka is shocked to hear that even the delinquents were trembling in fear, but this was the perfect time for the nerds to shine. They acted like they were the protagonists of their own anime, and they began taking out the goblins. The jocks were inspired by all the nerdy bravery going on, so they helped out, and the monsters were defeated. The class rep quickly gathered herself and led everyone to a safe riverside clearing. The nerds took the opportunity to shine even more as they helped everyone set up camp. Thanks to their lifelong dedication to avoid touching grass, they became experts in all things isekai, including survival. The class rep organized everyone and put them to work. Soon enough, everyone came together and began working as one. This didn't last long, however, as the popular girls decided that they didn't want to work anymore. The class rep tried to explain that their best chance of surviving is by sticking together, but the group started to fall apart. They were all tired of working so hard, so they just left all the responsibilities to the nerds. The class eventually fell apart completely, and there was nothing the class rep could do. From then on, only the class rep, the nerds, and a couple of other students did any work. The other students were just so lazy, so the nerds began to resent them. They were even in charge of doing all the fighting. The nerds were super dependable though, as they just wanted to get stronger and level up. This was because they saw what skills the delinquents picked. Some of the skills they chose were Charm and Puppeteer, two abilities that grant control over other people. The nerds knew that the delinquents had bad intentions, so they were leveling up to stand against them. The delinquents were working hard to level up as well because they needed to in order to use the skills. The nerds kept a very close eye on the delinquents, and they eventually heard what they planned to make some of the girls do. The nerds told the class rep, so she decided that she would have to level up as well. Unfortunately, the delinquents reached the level requirements for their skills soon after. The class rep just so happened to run into them at the worst moment, but seconds later the delinquents were on the ground. The nerds were prepared for this very moment, and they used their seal abilities to seal the charm and puppeteer skills of the delinquents. They exposed the forced harem plans of the delinquents, so the delinquents run out of the camp. However, one night, the delinquents made their return, and they got their revenge by using weapons. They destroyed the camp and declared that they would be back later to cause more chaos. For some odd reason, the nerds ended up receiving all the blame for what happened. The popular girls that they kept from becoming puppets ended up being the ones to turn on them first, and the other students followed. The class rep and a few other students took the nerds' side, but it was too much to deal with, and the nerds decided to just leave. Haruka feels really bad for them, so he throws a mushroom party for them. Haruka ended up spending the next day with the nerds as well, and he determines that not being a loner is okay sometimes. Haruka eventually says goodbye to his new buddies, and they offer to let Haruka join them. They are going to look for a town so they can get started as adventurers. Haruka agrees that he's closer to the nerds compared to the other groups, but he shocks everyone when he still declines. Haruka simply shoos them away, so the nerds leave. Haruka admits to himself that he would like to head into town, but he knows that with his terrible stats, he would only hold the dweebs back. The nerds seem pretty worried about the class rep, so Haruka decides to go check on the other students. On his way there, Haruka is confronted by a kobold, but he manages to punch it into unconsciousness. Haruka is surprised to see that no students are left at the campsite, and his enemy detection skill reveals some footprints. Following the trail leads him to find the popular girls. Haruka panics and decides to get started on cooking dinner back home, but the girls try to stop him. They say that they just want to talk, but Haruka knows that being around them is the exact opposite of quiet solitude. Haruka runs for his life, but he is shocked when the girls politely ask him to stop by saying please. The girls explain that they're looking for the nerds, but Haruka assumes that they just want to put them to work again. The girls shock him, however, as they want to apologize to the nerds because they just now realized that they owe their lives to them. Haruka knows that these girls have never apologized in their entire lives, but they are very serious. Haruka breaks the bad news by explaining that they have no chance of catching up to the nerds, but they still want to know where they went. Haruka points out that they wouldn't make it out of the woods the way they are now because they don't even know how to fight. The girls are discouraged, but Haruka demands to know if this means that they're just going to give up. He demands to know if they're serious about apologizing to the nerds, and Haruka thinks about how he needs to test the girls for the sake of the nerds. Haruka's tough motivation tactic backfires, however, as the girls begin to cry. They just wanted to apologize to the nerds, but now they fear that they will be eaten. Haruka has no clue what's going on, so the girls beg for Haruka to teach him how to survive until they find the nerds. Haruka accidentally says yes, and this activates his domination skill. This makes him rule over the girls, and Haruka wonders how this could have happened. The girls end up following him around like lost puppies with soulless eyes. It's also terrifying because the girls now finish off bad guys without a single word. They even bring crystals dropped by the monsters like they are dogs returning a frisbee. Haruka tries to heal the girls, but they just heal him even though he doesn't need it. Haruka fears what the class rep would say if she saw all this, and he wonders how he can cancel his domination skill. Just then, the class rep finds him, but Haruka is thinking too hard about a solution to even notice. He doesn't realize that she's there at all, so she forces him to acknowledge her. Elsewhere, the delinquents make a plan of their own, and they determine that they must start by getting rid of their biggest problem. Thanks for watching my recap. Subscribe to the channel for more videos.